Jim Seitzer, how are you, sir?
Doing good today.
Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit quickly about you, maybe what you've been up to over the last couple of years with yourself, your business, and your life in the fitness community, and then we can kind of go back to the beginning.
Well, as you know, my business is Bandbell LLC, and I make kinetic weightlifting bars, and started actually incorporated back in 2008, and just slowly kept rolling with it until I've gotten to where it is today. I think a lot of people have heard about the earthquake bar. Mm-hmm. Bamboo bar is actually a catch-all name for everything. I mean, the 11 different bars that I make, they all call every one of them the bamboo bar. Right, so right. I've gotten used to that, and that works actually. Rhino flex bar, and but anyhow, so that's what I do. And
for people just listening, maybe just describe, if you've never seen a bamboo bar, if you Google it, you'll probably quickly be like, oh, yeah, I've seen these. But maybe just describe what it is and how it would differ from a barbell. We all pretty much know what a steel or iron barbell is.
Yeah.
But how would a bamboo bar differ? And eventually I want to hear where this idea came from.
Well, it's, you think of a standard barbell, except there's no steel or metal in anything that I make. Mm-hmm. And it's composites and wood. Earthquake and bamboo bars, and the Emax bar, it has wooden dowels on the end of it. Ash dowels or like yellow birch, which is a really very, very durable. I got lucky with that, putting the wooden end pieces on it. When I originally came up with the idea, because it was so good for rehabbing shoulder injuries, I thought this is going to be great for physical therapy clinics. And if you go into one of those, you'll see a lot of wooden tables and all that type of thing. I thought wood will fit in really, really nice.
Interesting.
And I originally wanted to make it out of either fiberglass or some sort of molded plastic, but it was just prohibitively expensive. And so going with wood was a lot less expensive. And I thought this is going to work out really good. But the ironic thing is the world of PT didn't want anything to do with it for years and years.
I would say at some capacity still. I mean, I've been in PT offices over the last couple of years, and I don't know where I first saw or heard of the bar, but it would have been some social media video, but not through PTs at any capacity.
Yeah, and I think it's because the American Physical Therapy Association is just that. It's its own entity. And I think any new modalities that come online that they are going to embrace has to come from on high. So if... and I tried to connect with them. It just didn't work. But the independent physical therapy clinics, like athletic clinics and that type of thing, they go for it right now. So,
Yeah, and also, I don't want to disparage physical therapy as a trade, but what I have personal experience, this is my personal experience, is that they're dealing with a lot of people who never had serious athletic capacity previous to getting into the therapy room. They were, Sally Soccer Mom, as we've kind of said on this podcast before, who maybe didn't really ever train, has an ankle injury. I've had a lot of ankle injuries, so I've been in the podiatry world a little bit. They go in there, and you have a PT who maybe is fit, but I definitely saw some PTs who were pretty overweight, and I was thinking to myself, geez, am I taking fitness advice from the right person? But they would kind of just have a very prescriptive sort of catch-all way of doing foot and ankle. Okay, you do the balance block, and okay, you do the calf stretch, and then you do, some calf raises, and then you do some, hip strengthening things to make sure that you're stabilized at the core, and then okay, your 6 weeks is up and you're done.
Yeah.
That was my personal experience. I wasn't ever seeing people who were like, no, Alex, we're going to get you back to playing high level soccer. It was make sure the guy can walk and is fine, check our boxes and get him out.
Yeah. And a lot of the independent physical therapy clinics are outfits are usually athletic guys that kind of want to distance themselves from the sort of medical version of it a little bit. But anyhow, yeah, so that's...
So this earthquake bar, it has a lot of applications, but it's very light. We have one here at the gym. It's 10 pounds, 15 pounds maybe.
I think you have the Emax bar, don't you? Do you have the...
It's got the wooden grooves on the side.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Is it three grooves or four? I can't remember which one.
I don't know. I think 3.
Okay, just a standard earthquake. Yeah, it weighs about 6.4 pounds.
Jeez.
So it's very light and but really durable. It'll last forever.
Yeah, and when you put even just like 20 pounds on each side, so to your point, maybe 45, 47 pounds on that bar, it feels like you got 135 pounds.
Right.
On that
I call
bar.
it super gravity. So 100 pounds on the earthquake bar is not like 100 pounds on a steel bar.
100 pounds on that earthquake bar would be a lot of weight.
It'll challenge you pretty good. Because it's highly kinetic. I mean, it's hanging from those 41-inch bands, and it's driving all that kinetic energy into that bar, which then is conducted into your body because of the composites. The actual composite makeup of the bar goes a long way into how that energy is distributed into the body. So steel doesn't do the same thing. Steel will not conduct that kinetic energy into the body the way composites do, and that's what they're all finding out right now.
So the way that you generally will utilize this bar is you'll take bands, you'll wrap it around, and then you'll wrap a weight on a bar like ours.
Yeah, you take generally the general all-purpose kinetic motor for the earthquake bar is the 41-inch mini band. That's used about 85% of the time. When guys want to start lifting more weight or get kind of a more complex kinetic frequency, they can go to a different kind of band like a Monster Mini or a 1-inch band, which will have a different frequency. And then when you get these multiple frequencies acting on the bar, it works in its own good way. It's hard to get accommodation with this because there's so many variables. And it's just it's almost endless, all the different, and you can hook chains onto it through bands, and But generally speaking, the earthquake series are what I have dubbed the high kinetic workouts. The Rhinoflex bar, which loads plates onto it, is low kinetic. So, and I can talk about the Rhinoflex bar a little bit later because it's its own unique animal too. So,
maybe just talk to me about your business a little bit. What is the breakout of that kind of piece of it to the other pieces? Like, how much of the business is the earthquake bar? I know I'm using the catch-all term right now.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of those hyperkinetic ones versus kind of the low flex ones. The low flex ones was sort of new to me. You schooled me on that.
Yeah.
I had seen the other ones, but those are the ones that I think make great social media clips, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we've probably all seen those, but the other ones, there's not as much to see, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the high kinetic series, the earthquake series, that is, like 80% of the business. And Bandbell is basically a two-part business model. I manufacture bars for resellers out there like Rogue, Elite FTS, Westside Barbell, Sirius Steel down in Roanoke, Virginia, and I don't know, 6 or 7 other resellers here in the U.S. So the other part of it is Bandbell website, which is, you can buy anything there too. The difference is the Rhinoflex series, which is low kinetic, is only sold on the Bandbell website. Rogue wants to carry that, but I can't do it because I could not keep up with the. It's a difficult bar to make. All right, so it's intricate, and so couldn't make it the numbers they would need it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the benefit of the earthquake style bars is sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to work a lot of those like stabilizing muscles.
Right.
Almost like, I'm sure you know what like a slack line is. So if you're standing on a slack line, if anyone's ever tried to stand on a slack line, it doesn't look hard when you're watching somebody do it, and then you step up and you're like, oh gosh, like this is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I would kind of think it's similar to that with like your arms, shoulders, core, back, everything, that you have to brace all those as it's shaking to kind of keep that bar in place and control it on the way down.
Oh yeah.
Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. I mean, you get an idea of what, you kind of get a window, a picture into somebody's shoulder structure the very first time you see them handle an earthquake bar with 25-pound kettlebells on each side. And how they handle that lets you know how their stabilizing muscles, like the rotator cuff and the smaller muscles around the joint. Bicep, long head of the bicep is also a stabilizer for the shoulder joint. So if they're, if it's shaking like crazy and literally throwing them off the bench and that type of thing, they're not getting a lot of activation from those stabilizers. But some people, I mean, you'll set them up in the very first set, and they're kind of doing a really, great job with it, like somebody's been doing it for a year or two. So, and that tells you a lot if you're trying to help this person, but the bar was originally, after 35 years of heavy powerlifting and bodybuilding, I started having shoulder issues back in 2005 and 6. This went on for like a year and 3 months, and I just was in constant inflammation cycles, and it just couldn't figure out what was wrong.
Front part of the shoulder, back part of the shoulder, all of it?
The whole joint, and was having problems squatting, getting my hands
Just
back.
Getting the bar back.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. And went and saw everybody I knew, chiropractors, and, fix this thing. And that didn't work. And then...
Did you ever see any surgeons that told you, hey, this needs a surgeon?
Well, I did, talk to in a gym, you'll find everything. Everything I know about life, you'll find in a gym, because every kind of person's in there. Yep. Surgeons, you name it, lawyers. And so I finally thought, I'm just going to have to go in and get it done. I'm going to have to go in, and they're going to have to go in and do it, replace it, or whatever they're going to do. And then on a Sunday, I was over at Westside Barbell, and Louis was there working out, and a bunch of guys, and I hung 2 25-pound kettlebells on a broomstick, just like a 7-foot long, not quite even that, oak broomstick, And I before I did that, I was trying to warm up with a 45-pound steel bar, and it was killing me. It was like, I couldn't believe it. And same old stuff. Anyhow, and I put those kettlebells on there, and I thought, I'm just going to drive myself right over to Riverside Hospital after this, because and I was pretty low. I was after months and months of this, and
you've been an athlete all your life.
Yeah, it was depressing, So I laid down, and I took that bar out, that stick out, and I did 10 reps with it, and threw it back in the rack. And before my feet hit the ground, I knew something big had happened, because I just did 10 reps with 50 pounds with no pain at all.
Yeah, more weight than you were doing previously.
Yeah, first time I did a bench press in over a year, and it didn't hurt my shoulders.
Same range of motion, basically, all the way down, all the way up?
All the way down, all the way up. So, I laid into it, did 5 or 6 more sets, till I was like, and I could feel everything shaking in there, Bottom line is, 6 weeks later, I was about 80% back. 2 months later, I was 100% back, and it was throttle up. So, I thought, well, maybe it's just me, maybe it just works for me for some reason. I'm a middle-aged guy and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. And, but, so I, got Louis, I said, Louis, you got to try this, and and so there's those other guys in there that had shoulder issues, and it caught fire with them, and that was the start of it. But I still dragged my feet for about a year or so, and because I didn't know anything about making anything.
This is something I don't know about you. I know about your kind of time early in gymnastics and West Side and bodybuilding, but then I know about the start of Bandbell. I don't know what that middle tier of life was. Presumably you had a job and an income.
Yeah, family business, printing business, that type of
Printing
thing.
business, okay.
Yeah.
So you had some business experience. You weren't just totally coming in cold.
Right, but no putting my own business together, So, anyhow, after a while, it became abundantly clear that I better do something with this idea. And so, you take the plunge, and you just started just trying to source materials and trying to come up with what was going to work best. And I tried everything. I tried plastic. I tried aluminum for the bar section, for the tubing. And finally found a company that makes the composites that the bar is made out of now. And then, worked on the NP. Actually, the very first bar was the bamboo bar. So it had these crosshair slots put in it. Okay, because I thought, I still think in physical therapy. Physical therapy is going to want something really, really safe. So you'll slide the bands into the slots and all that kind of stuff. But the guys at Westside Barbell, after about 4 or 5 months, they said, "Hey, we like this bar, but we don't want these goofy ass these slots you got going here." I thought, okay, and so I was playing around with a pencil. And I was at Mom's house, and she had these sewing spindles, made out of wood. And I dropped one on there, and I dropped a second one on. I dropped a third one on there, and it was segmented. And I thought that'll work because those mini bands. When you have 4 bands together, that's 2 inches. And I thought, okay. So I found somebody to turn these dowels at that exact dimension. And those 3 segments that you put the bands in, and that was the birth of the earthquake bar, which the West Side guys wanted. They didn't want the bamboo bar. They were really all over me, and that worked. They were happy.
Wow! So just testing it in the gym, a couple of people wanted it. You saw that it worked for yourself with alleviating the shoulder pain. You saw it work for some other high-level athletes. So you knew there was something to it, and that could be a business.
Yeah, I mean, if you know Westside Barbell, if they don't like something, they don't care who you are, and you're not, you're going to hear that they don't like it. But they all, they went with it. And Louis had shoulder surgery. The very first video that was ever done, he had shoulder surgery. 3 weeks later, he started with that bar like right away. 3 weeks later, he was benching 315 after shoulder surgery, which is impossible almost, but he did it, and then he was holding the bar. He said, "And this is how I did it." All right,
wow, that's
whatever.
Amazing. So, what about a patent? Did you get a patent, or was that something that you considered?
Yeah, I did. I applied for a patent in 2013, and got it the next year for the earthquake bar and bamboo bar. And then the second patent I got, which was just about 4.5, 5 years ago, was for the Rhino Flex bar. So, and then I have more importantly, for international purposes, it's more important to have a registered trademark, Circle R. The Chinese, they don't care about a patent. You can have a patent in China, they don't care about that. But what they do have to pay attention to is a registered trademark.
Why is that?
Well, that's just what I learned from my patent attorney, who's been around for a long time.
Seems far easier to get around a trademark than a patent.
Nope, it's just the opposite. You can have I can patent the earthquake bar or anything in China. They don't care about that. But I've got the Circle R for Bandbell, Bandbell, earthquake bar, and Rhino Flex bar, and they will. They respect that.
Interesting.
That's just what I've learned.
Have you seen many bars come into the market that have been kind of eerily similar, or do you think that patent's actually worked pretty well?
In America, no, nobody's touched it. They'd be foolish to do that.
Right.
Overseas, I haven't. Every once in a while, I'll see something that comes online that looks kind of like that, but I'm not too worried about it. At least not yet. So, but yeah, I mean.
And what percentage of your business is worldwide business? I think before I got on here, I saw a video. I think it was the gal. She was the Olympic silver medalist. I think you posted that. She was training with the earthquake bar.
Yeah, the from India.
India. Yeah. I think it was India or China. Yeah, India.
And she works closely with Aaron Horshack at Squat University.
Yeah.
The international stuff is really coming on strong right now. It's kind of blowing us out of the water a little bit. Even though Rogue has an international presence in Western Europe, in the UK, Australia, and kind of in the PAC, the APAC region. I've got an affiliate company in Taiwan, Germany, France, and the UK. So, and Italy is the northern part of Italy. It does well with the bar. And now the Middle East, Dubai. I've got 3 companies coming after me to represent Bandbell in the Middle East, and I'm kind of surprised by that, you know. But Dubai's a rock and roll city, buddy, for, you know, fitness and all this. There's a lot of, I mean, it's a really small little country, and but it's happening. Yeah. Of course, they got all the money in the world too. You know.
Have you ever been?
No.
Yeah. So I actually went to the FIFA World Cup, and me and my friend, we went to Dubai for like 5 days, and then we were in Qatar for 5 days. It was amazing. It's really fascinating. It's kind of like a culture shock because they still have that very traditional Muslim value. So you will see women in like the full headdress, covered from head to toe. Yeah. But it's also very westernized. So then you'll see like a girl walk by in a mini skirt right after that, and you just got to do a double take. You're like, this is odd. Yeah. There's like a Texas Roadhouse like right on their plaza. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, we're still close to home. But it was amazing. Yeah, you know, just being underneath the Burj Khalifa, you look up and you're like, what is this? Right. It's a 200-story building. They have 100-story buildings in Dubai that are half the size, and you're like, this 100-story building is an enormous building, and it's half the size of that. It kind of boggles your mind, but I'd say if you get a chance to go and just play around, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, obviously the Middle East is a little more
actually about a year
dangerous now.
About a year and a half ago, I had gotten an order for some bars from the UAE embassy in Washington. I thought that's pretty cool. Shipped them over, you know, and that worked out. And then 5 or 6 months after that, couple of orders came in directly from the palace.
Like the Crown Prince.
And I thought, well, you know, whatever. And that's great. I mean, I thought it was great. And then after that, there was, you know, these fitness companies there reached out. And I didn't know if there was any connection there with that. Probably wasn't, probably coincidental, but I just thought it was fun. It was interesting. You know, I never had anything like that happen before.
Healing shoulder pain all over the world, even at the highest levels, man.
But you know, here's the thing. The thing about using high kinetic training, I mean, I came up with the idea and pushed the idea because of shoulder injuries, shoulder problems, and what I call bulletproofing. So when you use those bars, as you know, on a regular basis, it's pretty hard to get a shoulder injury, and it keeps all that stuff working really, really well. But then, you know, by no work of my own, people would come to me and say, you know what, I used to have these flexibility problems in my shoulder, and that's all gone now. And then the military reached out and wanted him for training programs that they had going for agility and balance and that type of thing. So there was, another segment that it was good at. And all in all, there's like in form, coaches. I'm not a good coach, but I'd have these coaches reach out and say, you know what, this bar teaches good form, like in bench press, squat, overhead pressing, whatever you're doing, which I guess I took for granted or didn't even really think about. So, because if you're benching with it, you have to bench with good form, or the bar will punish you.
Right.
It won't like that.
You can't get too far up over your head.
Yeah,
or
you'll start
too low. You'll just lose it.
You have to get into the right positions. Same thing with squat. You have to get into the right position for squats when you're using this bar, or it's going to throw you around. So it had all these other little talents that I didn't know about. I mean, and which is kind of fun. The fun thing about it.
So I know you've talked a little bit about just like bench pressing, but there's so many applications. Is that the primary move that you will prescribe to people who have shoulder pain? Is bench pressing? Is it incline pressing? Is it shoulder pressing? Is it all the above?
Yeah, if you have a shoulder issue, or even if you're starting with it, the best place to start is on the bench press. If you go to my YouTube channel, there's a 2-minute video called The 5 Pillars of Shoulder Rehab. And it takes you through the step-by-step exercise of what to do to get on board with it in a nice logical progression.
Yeah, I think
once the stabilizers get strong and start working together with the primary movers, and that's where the beauty is. Because in a major movement, the big boys say, to the little guys, get out of the way. This is our job. And when the bar starts shaking and all that kind of stuff, that's when the stabilizers tell the primary movers to get out of the way. They take over. In time, what the research is showing, the stabilizers and the primary movers begin to work together in concert. And when you get to that stage, now you have something truly great. And they're finding out that does take time. So what you're getting is a nervous system activation that's different than anything else.
Yeah, I think maybe is that the study, the nonlinear analysis of unstable bench press bar path and muscle activation? Is that one of the ones you were talking about? I'm sure there's been a couple of studies on it.
Yeah, they call it unstable load training.
Yeah, and one of the other things about it is that you can use significantly less weight in training like that. You obviously, having trained extremely heavy, we can get to your, looks like you've benched over 430 in a meet at a weight at 220. I don't know if you've ever gone heavier than that, but a dang near 500-pound bench press, you've trained pretty dang heavy. You don't have to train nearly as heavy with this bar, which I presume is a lot better in your opinion for the joints.
Yeah. I mean, the Germans have figured out that you can use lighter weight and get more activation, anywhere between 17 and 20% higher activation. So, which is good. I mean, there's nothing that takes the place of heavy weights, but like you said, in the upper body, in the shoulder girdle, using high kinetic training will give you a much longer life in the gym and thwart off, osteoarthritis and, joint issues.
Yeah. Well, I know you say nothing replaces heavy weight, but like my mom is, I think she's 64 now. She's 64 or 65. Like, would she ever pick up a bench press and try to like be like, yeah, I'm going to like really push this?
Women love this bar.
Exactly.
I hear
I could see
10 to 1
this.
women, they love it. I mean, especially if somebody brings them on, brings them up right on it, or, doesn't overload them with weight and make it too shaky and all that kind of stuff. And because it's a light bar, and they enjoy that. I mean, it's just it's a fun thing, and while the magic is happening at the same time.
It's amazing, man. So take me back to the start. You start your career in athletics as a gymnast, and you eventually go on to compete at Ohio State as a gymnast.
Yeah,
I know you just talked about your biceps. I heard you say that you tore your bicep.
I did.
But maybe just tell us about your life as a gymnast, and then what kind of came next.
My life as a gymnast was pretty uneventful. I mean, I liked it a lot, and you know, I was always a real small kid, you know, I just found gymnastics, and it was something I could do, and I was halfway decent at it, you know, and then went to you know, my senior year of the Ohio State gymnastics competition. Actually, it was at Ohio State University in their gymnastics facility. And I had a good day that day. And the coach from Ohio State came up to me. His name was Jim Sweeney. He said, have you thought about going to college? I said, no. No one in my family ever went to college. And he said, well, you ought to think about coming to Ohio State. He said, come to my office in a couple of weeks and we'll sit down and talk about it. And gave me a scholarship.
Wow.
And which was like,
Yeah,
I didn't care about college. I just wanted to do sports, man. That's all I cared about. And by the time I graduated, the only reason I was doing gymnastics was because of college. So I fell in love with physiology and anatomy and those kind of sciences, and worked hard at it. Didn't come easy, but I loved it. And then was doing gymnastics at the same time, so it was great.
I'm a little surprised that after college you didn't kind of continue that formal path and become a PT or something along those lines.
Well, I did. I mean, I did. I went to graduate school, and actually I was paid for graduate school by being the academic advisor for Allied Med, and that was PT, OT, rad tech, medical illustration, nursing, all that kind of stuff. So, and almost, I was 1 quarter shy of getting my master's in exercise physiology. And then my family, there was a kind of a situation where my sister and her husband, their business was in trouble, and I thought, I'll take a quarter off, you know, and I'll come back and get it. And I didn't. I never went back. I do regret that. I wish I would have gone back. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, I carried it over into grad school for a while, you know.
So how do you get mixed up with that ragtag bunch that you...
Westside Barbell?
Yeah, eventually. Well, it's really, I mean, you got mixed up with them. They got mixed up with you. I mean, the whole thing kind of came together at that point in time. It's a really interesting time to be there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, I was working out at the OSU weightlifting club after gymnastics, and I just couldn't gain any weight. I was always cutting lean and all that kind of thing, but
as a gymnastics who did the rings,
yeah, and my natural body. I mean, you know, even now, I mean, it's but you know, so one Saturday, this guy comes in there and he's like, we never saw anything like him before. He was just really thick with muscle and benching a lot of weight, and after a while, I went up to him and started talking to him and asking him questions and everything. I think he threw in the towel. He said, I was bugging him. He just threw the towel in and said, just come to my place next Saturday, you know. Okay. And that was Louis Simmons. And I went to his house 1 week later, and that was the start of it.
What kind of setup did he have at that point in time?
He had a homemade squat rack down in his basement, and we were using a barbell that was 1.25 inches in diameter, the entire length. There were no collars on this thing.
Jeez.
And the plates we were using were small hold plates. I mean, these were ancient, you know, Bob Hoffman plates from York, Pennsylvania. I didn't know any better. I mean, you know, and so did that for a long, stayed in that basement for 3 or 4 months, and then it went out into his garage. And used those small hold plates for years, man.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
I remember
100-pound plates, 100-pound plates with small holes in them.
I was going to ask, like, how big were those plates? Because I'm envisioning these tiny little, like, what curl bars, kind of like your home gym setup from
the
a
60s.
long time
I mean,
ago.
yeah, you know.
But I never had seen 100-pound plate. I had only seen 10s and 15s.
I had 100s, 50s, 25s, 10s and 5s. And they were all small holes, you know, and the bar was like flexible. It was a cold rolled steel bar, so it was user friendly, and we loved that bar. We loved the whole setup until it broke one day. It just snapped like a number 2 lead pencil. It was ugly. It went through the wall and everything.
Jeez, isn't it funny that bar you probably just threw in the trash can, but now that's like a relic of powerlifting history.
I mean, you know, they got to be, they're antiques.
Yeah. So you get mixed in with this Louis guy, and I was listening to your interview with Tom about those early days, and it kind of sounded like Louis would just tell you guys what you were going to do. Is that accurate? And you just went, yeah, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, we just, you know, I didn't know anything. I mean, it was he taught us how to squat. He'd been lifting 10 years by himself and had done very, very well nationally in junior national competition as well. And taught him. He was self-taught, but he had perfect form. Everything he did was just really, really well done, and that's what he taught us. So I and the other 4 guys that were there with me, we all had the benefit of this exquisite form that allowed all that energy and power and growth to happen. So, you know, wide stance, powerlifting form, low on the back, deadlifts. It didn't. We just didn't make any mistakes. No one ever got hurt. I mean, we get strains and that type of thing. The only one that ever really got hurt was Louis.
Yeah,
he broke his back. Yeah. But you know,
and maybe if someone's listening, we've talked about Louis before on this podcast, but maybe just give us 30 seconds on who Louis Simmons is, why he's important and relevant to the fitness world.
You know, the ground zero for powerlifting and strength training and cutting edge concepts and all that was right here in Columbus, Ohio. And that happened on the west side of Columbus by Louis Simmons. He was a genius. He was a brilliant man. And he was able to just come up with these great ideas and great concepts, and he knew how to put it together. It was just a never-ending fountain of creativity the whole time, and I was so lucky I got to see all that right from day one.
That was going to be a question that I asked you. What was it about Louis that allowed him to innovate while also taking ideas from so many different places? He was taking, he was reading these very obscure Soviet weightlifting books and Bulgarian weightlifting.
Bulgarian strength, right.
He's taken these very obscure things that probably if you and I were sitting there just meeting him in a bar, we'd be like, what are you talking about, man? But he was able to take those things, use them, and to your point, be creative. And you even said that he would listen to what other people were saying. He wasn't so rigid in his ideas that he goes, no, this is the way to do it. He would be willing to change if he felt like something was wrong.
Right.
What was it about the guy that allowed that to happen?
I don't know. I mean, I think in the 10 years he trained by himself, he would go to competitions and watch other people lift. And so he took in a lot of, visually took in a lot of things and worked with himself for 10 years. Can you imagine that? Back for the weights being lifted back in those days, they were very high. And so he's lifting big weight like this on his own for 10 years. I mean, that's pretty, and that's back in the dark ages of powerlifting, back the 60s where powerlifting started. And with Bill Peanuts West out there, the original West Side Barbell out in California, and a number of guys. And Louis, I think, just that just came to him, and he made it work for his particular body type and for what felt right for him. So, and we were the benefit of that, but he would also change things a little bit. He was creative, and he would find better ways to do things. And we saw that too. He just had an instinct about it. It was just
And
constant.
An instinct, and he was able to trust that instinct and go out and test.
Yeah, and he wasn't afraid to try anything. I mean, but even still, a lot of the concepts he would mess with, somehow he had an idea that it would work, and he had a very high success ratio. We all, just about the time you think it's nothing else he can come up with, he came up with it, and so you just sit back and let it happen.
So how did training change from the time that you kind of walked in those doors to the time that he pretty much felt like he knew what the formula was?
Well, so I was there for about 11 years, and all through the entire garage time. And then he moved out of the garage into a location on the west side. And I would train over there occasionally, but basically I'd gotten 2 elites in powerlifting, and I chose not to pursue it any further. I squatted 740 in my last meet as a 220, and I didn't want to push it any further than that.
Felt like that was about as far as you could go safely.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Now, I'll never know if that was a good decision or not, but I was starting to have issues at that heavier weight, because we were doing like upper 7, 8. I was doing 820, 840 box squats, and at 210 with my own particular talent. And I was more gifted as a bodybuilder and not a power lifter. I was always the weakest guy at Westside Barbell, and that was okay, because it made me big.
When you also say 220, I mean, at that point, were there any guys that were, I know 220, you just say that's a small guy, but
well, 220-pound class.
Yeah. So you were probably walking around a lot heavier.
No, actually, I couldn't. My general standard weight when I was off season doing powerlifting was anywhere between 212 and 215. And Louis kept saying, start eating more. So, you got to be full 220 and actually get up to 225 and then drop down. And I did everything under the sun. I was eating everything.
Your body was saying, this is as big as we go.
I was always lean. I couldn't put that extra weight. I'm small joints. And all those other guys were naturally very talented, very gifted power lifters, big joints, fire plug kind of physiques on them. And, they just were stronger than hell. I mean, just unbelievable. So I was just kind of a bodybuilder, power lifter, just trying to keep up.
Interesting. That's amazing, man. Yeah. So by the time that you got to that 11th year, how different was that training?
A lot of things had changed. He came up with, reverse hypers, number one, and belt squats, different variations on rack bench pressing, variations on rack deadlifts, good mornings done with a particular style. We used to call them wave good mornings. It's hard to explain without showing you, but and then blending in a lot of different accessory work in all of the 3 lifts, and that was huge. So we just kept building on ideas and kept doing things,
Yeah, and presumably your focus was, you wanted to get strong, obviously, but you wanted to look good as a bodybuilder. Did you adapt their training at all and say, hey, I need to do a little bit more, whatever, calves or forearms or this or that, or no, not necessarily?
Well, yeah, I mean, accessory work for me was, I had to do it because I would go do bodybuilding after powerlifting in Lou's garage. And I also found out that the accessory work I was doing as a bodybuilder made me a stronger powerlifter. So, we weren't doing much accessory work in the early days of Westside Barbell.
You got the good morning pulled up here in typical Westside fashion. There's a whole extremely long description of what this is and different variations and everything.
Variations of good mornings. Yeah, there's
he was looking up the
ton of different ways to do it.
The wave good mornings.
I was trying to find the wave good morning, but there's nothing specifically that I see that says wave. But
that was a term that we coined for it, because what we were doing was when we went over down, we would wave the back up, so it would come up like a wave.
Interesting.
And that's just what we called it. Actually, Laura Dodd, who was 5 times world powerlifting champ, and she and Mariah Liggett were Batman and Robin of women's powerlifting for years. They owned it, and so Laura came up with the wave good morning idea, and we liked it. It was good. You can do good mornings all different kinds of ways, but that way worked pretty good, and that's what I preferred too. Made me stronger.
But bodybuilding was your focus. So what was it like competing at that point in time?
Well, yeah, it's I was one of the bigger. Bodybuilding in those days was in short, medium, and tall class. So I was one of the biggest short bodybuilders in America at that time. And that was powerlifting, But competition-wise, I did the powerlifting. I did bodybuilding 6 months out of the year, and then I would shift gears and do powerlifting 6 months out of the year. And I did that for years, and then I finally retired from bodybuilding and went full-time into powerlifting with Lou in the garage, and then got a couple of elites. But the funny thing is, I had a lot more success as a bodybuilder. I won a lot of first-place overalls as a bodybuilder, and just was an average powerlifter. I mean, elite is good. That's great. But compared to the guys I was working out with, I'm just like Ohio, and I had an elite in 220, and I never forget the day I got that. And there were so many world records. So I get my elite in 220. I didn't even get a notice. I was like 11th or 12th in the lineup.
I saw that. Yeah.
And these guys are like, they're busting world records left and right and getting their equipment checked. And this is for the state powerlifting competition.
And they're breaking world records.
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Black's Health World comes down. Pacifico sends over some boys from Dayton, and Westside Barbell and everything. It was just, it's just nuts. And I remember thinking, this is not happening anyplace else on this planet.
Yeah,
it's just not.
And between Westside and those other ones you named, it clearly seemed like the Midwest for some reason just like incubated that powerlifting in that time period.
Oh yeah, and still, and you had Don Reinhout back in the early days over there in Dayton area, but Larry Pacifico. He was a monster. And then John Black up north with Danny Wolber, 19-year-old kid, pulled 900. One of only 5 guys on the planet back then that pulled a 900-pound deadlift.
Crazy, 19 years old.
Yeah. John Florio and Jack Sedaris. These are big names in powerlifting back in those days. That it was a wild, wild west, man. I'm telling you.
That's amazing, man. So back to the business. Do you ever feel like you created this thing, you gave the world something impactful, and now that's like the peak of your sort of like contributions? Do you know who David Weck is? We created the Bosu ball. He's created a bunch of other things. He's got this thing called WEC method. If you listen to anything or listen to any podcasts that's on, he's a really kooky but interesting guy. But after he created the Bosu ball, he had enough money that he's like, I could basically, like kind of not work that hard. Like the business was, people were buying Bosu balls, whether I was selling them or not. They were selling themselves essentially. He's like, so I had so much free time on my hands that I started to like not work, and I started to get depressed because I was like, whoa, this is like the best thing that I'm ever going to give to the world. I'm not saying that's true for you, but clearly you've invented something that is remarkable. The fitness community has taken it on. Is there any concern there or feelings that like, hey, this is the invention and anything else after this may not be as good? Or
I never think like that.
Interesting.
Not one time. I think my strength is coming up with new ideas, and I'm still doing it. If you just leave me alone and put me in a gym and don't bother me, the ideas come. So I've got a half a dozen new ideas right now that I'm trying to work on and trying to get in a position where I can start doing something with them. But it's very difficult because I spend most of the time running the business. And but coming up with new ideas and working on that's what I love to do. And one of the things I told you, fall in love with the process. If you can get your hands on the process in the right way, then good things are going to happen. First of all, you need patience. And in the early days, I thought these ideas that I have, I've got to make them perfect. They have to be just perfect. And that was a wrong way to go about it. So now when I come up with an idea and I build a prototype, I don't care what it looks like. You may not even recognize it. And it doesn't matter. The only thing is, how do I make this do what I think it should do? And take your time. Patience is the most important thing. If you're patient and the idea is good, it'll happen. It'll unfold the right way. But if you force it, and it becomes a traffic jam, so to speak. So that's the biggest advice. People ask me all the time, like, who's your patent attorney? And, I got this idea and all this kind of stuff. I just tell them, be patient with it, take your time, think it through, and work on prototypes. It took me 6 prototypes to get the Rhino Flex bar to where it is today. So you fiddle with it, you build another prototype, you test it. Got to have that testing. And I was real lucky. Metro Fitness Worthington and Mike Davies, great guy. Any idea I have, just take it over. I can leave it there. And if it stands, after a couple of months, it's in the corner, it's got cobwebs on it, it's not working.
Not good.
On the other hand, if it looks like it's dragged behind a pickup truck after a couple of months, I know they're liking it. So you just have to fall in love with the process.
You, as an inventor, it sounds like invention is kind of the thing that you like to do. Could you ever foresee in your business you just focusing exclusively on that part of it? Like, hey, I just want to innovate. I don't want to do the sales. I don't want to do the marketing. I don't want to do the accounting. Or is that maybe still a little far away?
No, I think that's a natural step that will probably happen, and I'll keep doing it as long as the ideas keep coming. And and sometimes I think, I'll never I'm done. I can't come up with anything else. As soon as I think like that, a couple of weeks later, something happens. I think, geez, I can't believe it. But and so then I'll get to work and try to slap together some kind of, prototype and play with the concept and see if it works that way. I have one major rule.
Okay.
I build every idea that I have.
Interesting.
All right. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I build every single idea. That's both a blessing and a curse. So when Rhinoflex in January of 2016, I'm sitting in my office and it was like super cold. It was like this, and I've got all these bars leaning up against the wall, so I can look at all these different bars. It's good. It sparks the imagination and I think the creative process. And I thought, I wonder if what would happen if I tried to make a barbell, a regular plate loading barbell out of this material that the earthquake bar is made out of. And I thought, that's a dumb idea. And I thought, but
it was too late.
But
you already had
I had my idea, and I thought, geez, all right. And that was in January. So I took my time because I thought it was the dumbest idea yet. But I'll do it, stick with the rules. Finally, in June of 2016, I had these pieces, and I gave it to my assembly guys, and I said, slap this dumb thing together. Just slap it together, and they're laughing. And so they did, and I took it back to the office, and it just looked so rough and bad. And I had it by the door, and whenever anything's by the door, that means the next step is the trash can. And I thought, So the last Sunday in July of 2016, we have a group of guys, we bench press and everything. I took it in there, and I thought, oh man, I'm going to hear it for this. And I thought, if it breaks, I know right where the dumpster is, and that's where it goes. So we put it in the bench rack, and we start loading weight on it. 10 minutes later, it got real quiet. And I said, let me ask you guys something. Does this thing feel to you the way it does to me? An hour and 20 minutes later, I knew the first thing I was going to do Monday morning was call my patent attorney. And I did. I said, Tyler, how quick can you get me in patent pending? 30 days later, I was in patent pending for the Rhino Flex bar. It worked fabulously.
What was it you were feeling?
Ice cream to the joints. Ice cream. It's just like you're benching with it. You're getting chest and tricep activation. Didn't feel the shoulders at all. Smooth as 12-year-old scotch. I don't know how else to put it. Just perfect, and everybody loved it. I had to take it with me because I was afraid it was going to leave the gym. But
I told you this picture here that pops up with the girl on the turf.
Right.
I was there that day.
Oh, yeah.
I swear, I think I'm in a picture. Actually, it's so funny. Yeah.
What's her name? Darn it, she's terrific. And
so the Rhino Flex bar, it's obviously designed for an actual plate, and it still has some amount of flexibility to it.
Right.
And that's what's kind of absorbing that shock that your joints would previously have absorbed.
Right. That's the low kinetic bars. So, but it was like, it felt so great to the to shoulders, and then it wound up that carried over to squats, overhead pressing, and to a lesser extent deadlifting. So all I did, so right after that bar started working, and I still had that prototype, I didn't break it. It didn't break. Thank you. It didn't break. I'm so glad it didn't break. And we got up to 400 pounds on it. It held pretty good. So then that's all I did was the Rhino Flex bar for 3 months. Benching, overhead pressing, you name it. And then my shoulders, and one day my shoulders started acting up a little bit. 2 weeks later, I was in a full-blown inflammation cycle. And I thought, Jesus, now what? I mean, maybe it's time. I'm getting old. And I should, but then I thought, what am I doing different? Well, I haven't touched an earthquake bar for 3.5 months. Loaded up the earthquake bar with a high kinetic setup, and just started doing what I knew how to do as rehab training. 3 workouts, into the 4th workout later, my shoulders are back to normal again. That was a very important lesson. And I found out working with therapists that, I'll cut to the chase, and this is what's really important. The earthquake bar strengthens the stabilizers. That high kinetic action makes the rotator cuff and all those small muscles in there stronger. The Rhinoflex bar is simply an activator. All right. So I had strong stabilizing muscles going into using the Rhinoflex bar, but after 3 months, they gradually got a little weaker as time went on. Yes, they were getting activated, but they weren't staying strong. Then we found out the perfect world is to use high kinetic and low kinetic together, and that's what works.
Is it like a 1-to-1 ratio?
No, I mean, as long as you're doing some high kinetic work once a week, and you can vary it any way you want, they'll stay strong, and then you can do barbell, work with the Rhino.
Yeah. I also feel like I don't get nearly as sore when I use that bamboo bar. Like we've been bamboo benching this period, and I don't feel nearly as sore the next day. If I would have done like a heavy flat bench press workout, I feel like I would be really hurting and feeling it.
Right.
But I don't necessarily feel that as much so. I'm still going hard. I'm still pressing it to like basically failure.
Right.
But, it just doesn't feel quite as bad. So what advice would you have for inventors? Because it sounds like you've had a couple of inventions that clearly have, changed the world of fitness. There's huge influencers that are using it, like Bill Almeida. I saw him using it. Obviously, you talked about Squat U. Some of the strongest people in the world are using it. What's your kind of invention process? I know you said you build everything that comes to mind. Does inspiration just hit you when you're in the gym, or are you constantly thinking about problems?
No, there's a lot to be said for somebody who spends 40 years, 45 years doing something that pays dividends, to best way I can put it. You with your business here, 20 years from now, you're going to be a lot more creative, but simply because of the fact that you have been doing this for so long. You're talking to a guy that has lived his entire life in a gym. I mean, my whole life. And you just come up with better ways to do something, or a twist on something, It's not like I never force myself to come up with an idea, but it just happens for some reason. I wish I could tell you about some of these things I have on the back burner.
I'd love to hear about them when they come out, and maybe we'll have you back. So
you'll like it.
One of my ideas that I am a huge advocate for is I don't build every idea that I have, but I write every idea that I have down.
That's good.
Even if it's a dumb idea, or even if I'm like, oh, well, this probably already exists. I think at this point I have almost 100 different business ideas in my phone, and a handful of them already exist. A handful of them I have absolutely no business to be creating. One of them I'll just give you. I dreamed up like a tunnel system that packages would fly through with air pressure. And it's like, I'm not going to build that. Like, I'm not the guy who's going to do that. We have so many packages flying back and forth, and basically everything's traveling the same routes, right? And I'm like, okay, well, it'd take up a lot less space on the road. It just quick came to me. I think I remember I was sitting in a bar, and I just wrote it down, and then I have moved on, and I haven't thought about it much at all. It's not for me. That's like an Elon Musk type idea. I'm not that guy. It's not probably going to ever happen. If I was guarding it, I wouldn't have just said it out loud, but I wrote it down.
And you could build a small miniature system to see if it worked.
Who knows what you can do with it? Or some of these ideas stick in my mind, And to your point, I do have a patent on a product now. So now I'm just kind of wondering, what do I do with it next? I kind of was using, I'll just wait until the patent gets approved, or if it gets approved, as sort of a delay in my book for like actually like putting the product into action. Because obviously we have, almost 30 employees here, and we're pretty busy on the day to day. So it's like, well, what do I do with this thing? But that was a product that I wrote down, and I kept coming back to, and I kept hearing people on various podcasts kind of articulate the problem that it had solved. And I was like, gosh, I really probably should go out and do this thing. So what happens next, I don't know. But I'm a huge advocate for people just writing down their ideas, like right when they happen, because sometimes 10 minutes later you forget it, and you're like, what was that idea? I don't even remember. I don't know.
Yeah, I sleep with a paper and pen right next on the nightstand because, believe it or not, when you're trying to get to sleep, that's when a lot of ideas that come are names for things. And so I have to write it down because, I'll wake up in the morning, I won't remember that exact, or I'll draw a diagram, a sketch of what the idea should look like, because it's usually a physical thing, and got to write it down.
Yeah, I actually just had an idea. This is in the fitness industry. I'll tell you offline about this. But so you've been training for a long time, clearly, and you've been probably all over the world of fitness, from rehabilitating yourself from that bicep injury to deadlifting 661 pounds, as my notes say, and squatting dang near 800 pounds. If you were to give advice to me, a 32-year-old, about my fitness career, what would you say?
Well, you got to find what works for you, in your body type. It's you got to balance it with your family, with your job, and all that type of thing. It's harder today, I think. Unless you're somehow able to get the financing or move your life around, that you can really go into it 100%. I mean, or like full bore. It's in my case, I married the sport of bodybuilding. I mean, after gymnastics, and when I got in with Louis, it just I was extremely hardcore, and I married the sport, and I worked part-time. I was a starving artist type of thing. I didn't have a pot to piss in, but I didn't care, and I knew that I was squandering my youth at that time. I knew it, but I thought, you know what, I'll probably pay for it later on down the road, but I didn't care. I wanted to do this full throttle, and I did, and I was never sorry about it. When I was a little kid growing up, I grew up in a neighborhood, nothing but kids. Every house had 3 or 4 kids in it and all this kind of stuff. We had a giant field behind all this neighborhood, and in the summer it was baseball, in the fall it was football, and all this kind of stuff. And I was always, no one ever picked me because I was like, a little runt and all this kind of stuff. And that bothered me. And I remember thinking, if I ever find something, just one thing I can be good at, I'm gonna, and that never left me. So I was an okay gymnast, but I was a lot better bodybuilder and weightlifter than, as a gymnast. And
yeah, Steve, pull up some pics. I saw some earlier from your heyday, your bodybuilding career. I mean, you look great. I mean, you look like you could rival, with a Z, Seitzer. There you go.
Well, anyhow.
Yeah, there you go.
But so
there you go, man. Look at that back.
Oh yeah, I would come in ripped. Now I was like a middleweight in that one, but yeah, and you know what? I mean, and I really wish I was born 35 or 40 years later, because the technology that the bodybuilders have today, especially diet technology, what we were doing on a national level back in the 70s and 80s for diet was, nothing like what they're doing today. Today, everybody knows how to eat the right way, and to it's a part-time job, to build muscle and to really eat the right way. So, but we didn't do it back then. It was more deprivation dieting.
You
you
just
know,
do
and
the
it was
wrestler
terrible.
thing where not eating for a week,
I mean,
basically.
I could have come in like 15, 20 pounds heavier, and and all of us could have, but nobody was doing that back then. The thing back then was to come in completely shredded. I mean, incredibly ripped, and a lot of these guys did, and so, but things change, and
So what years were you actively competing in bodybuilding?
77 through 83.
That's kind of like right around that era that people reminisce on, right?
Yeah,
Like, I'm not sure like when Arnold was doing the Olympia.
Yeah, I won the Mr. Ohio in 77, and then I had won like four regional state competitions before that, and won it the second time I went into it. It was up in Fremont, Ohio. That is a cold February up in Fremont, and then went on to like regional national shows, like the Great Lakes Open, and then the Mideast Open, which was the kickoff for the nationals. Jim Mannion would always host that every year in Pittsburgh, and best condition in my life. I walked in on that, and it was just over. I had 9 first place votes across the board, and I just got lucky. I produced this incredibly ripped and condition, and I looked pretty big that day. 6 weeks after that, it was the USA in Memphis, and then 6 weeks after that, it was the Mr. America, and I got second place to Ron Teufel. I don't know if you know that name or not. He was the most popular amateur bodybuilder in America at that point in time. He was wildly.
Is that you right there?
No, that's not me.
I was gonna say he's got a mustache. I don't
No,
know if I've
I
ever seen
never-
you with a mustache.
I'm like an Indian. I can't. I shave once a week maybe.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Ron Teufel won it. The short class in the Mr. America competition down in Atlanta, and it was just a lot of fun. It was great camaraderie in bodybuilding back then. It was amateur. There was no money in it at that point in time, and to become a pro like Boyer Coe or Arnold or Franco and those guys, it was really rarefied air.
Right. At that time, there was only like a handful of pros, and those were like the best, 10 or 12 guys in the world kind of thing.
Yeah, and they were just like, 10 orbits higher than the amateurs in a way. Although Tom Platz started coming in about then, and I actually got to do a pose down with Tom Platz down in Cincinnati.
That's cool.
At the Mr. America in '78, but he's a great guy. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it went.
So what does training for longevity look like to you now at this point? Because you've done clearly some things that are extreme, and probably if you'd have gone back, well, don't let me hedge my bets here. If you'd have gone back and you said, I just want to feel healthy and strong into my late years, would you have trained in a similar way, or presumably would you have changed some things?
If I could change anything about what I did back in those days, and Louis would say the same thing, and any of the other people that we knew, and I'm not saying this, because this is what I make now, but it would have been nice to have some high kinetic, a chance to do high kinetic work for joints, because you'll last a lot longer in your lifting career if you bring that high kinetic stuff in there. I don't care what you use. You can use a broomstick if you want, whatever, but just hang kettlebells or plates from bands and do joint work with it. You'll thank yourself years later. You'll be very happy you did it, because you'll walk out of it with healthy joints. And if you really love training, you'll be like Arnold. You'll be in your mid 70s and you're still going to the gym and loving life.
Interesting. Yeah. So maybe just to kind of wrap things up, you texted me a couple of things. I just want you to expand on them. One of them was fall in love with the process. You sort of said that. You said keep it simple. What's that mean to you?
Keep it simple. The ceteris paribus, which means all things considered, keep it simple. Try not to borrow a boatload of money from the bank, and try not to gamble. But take your ideas and work on them. Have patience. Be patient on things and progress it forward in the simplest manner possible, if you can, with your idea. Not all ideas allow that, but mine did. And I think that just keep in building and putting your business together. Try to keep it as simple as you can as you introduce this new idea or as you start to market it or whatever. Obviously, if you're a rogue, this rogue started right around the time that I was playing around with kinetic bars. Of course, it's $1 billion business now, and which is nice. But try to keep it simple if you can, even in your thinking, and try not to get too spun out of control with moving it too fast and
Well, I think
too complex.
Kind of an analogy that is apt here is gaining muscle. There's kind of a correct speed to gain muscle. Gaining muscle too quickly is not necessarily good for you because you can hurt tendons, ligaments, joints. Gaining muscle too slow, no fun, right?
Yeah.
So same thing is true with a business, and I'm actually reading a book by Morgan Housel. It's called The Guide to Things That Never Change. And he was talking about kind of the appropriate size and speed for things. And he used this analogy of the tallest man to ever live. He eventually became like almost 9 feet tall, but he couldn't walk because he was just too large. His leg bones couldn't hardly support his weight. He was like almost 500 pounds too. And it's sort of just an analogy of like bigger is not always better. Growing fast is not always the right way to do it. There's an appropriate size for every animal. And he actually used this really interesting study that they took fish and they put one in a cold pond and one in a hot pond. And then they let them grow, I don't know, their first like year of their life in those environments. And then they took them and they put them both back in. And the fish that grew its first year in the cold pond lived something like 40% longer than the one that grew in the hot pond because it had to grow slowly through that first period of life, whereas the one in the warm pond grew very, very quickly and just ended its life a lot faster.
Yeah.
So there's sort of a knowledge to be gained there about the appropriate speed of things. To your point, whenever someone's talking about starting a business, I always say, get yourself a profitable, replicable transaction and then scale that, right? So like if you couldn't sell one bar, there's no point in making 1,000 of them. Like you don't need to sell 1,000 bars before you sell one bar. Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Sell one, take the money, reinvest, go again.
Yeah.
And look, unless you've sold a company for $1 billion before and you're like, yep, I'm going to take $100 million in financing and we're going to do this thing again. Like if you've never started a business before, like don't overcomplicate it. Prove to yourself you can actually do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and try not to, I know this sounds weird, but I always remember thinking that, I want to make something good, and if I can make a living doing it, that's great. But I didn't go into it for the money. I went into it because I thought this is my chance. This is my one shot to do something, and otherwise I'm going to be a greeter at Walmart. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, I just didn't. That fear will drive you to do things. I mean, I just didn't want that, and I thought, what am I going to do in middle age? There's a saying that goes like this: if you want to take the island, burn the boat.
Yep.
So I'd burn my boat.
This was it.
And you just go for it.
I think it's a perfect example. You can do good and you can do well at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that phrase. A lot of people are.
Do good first.
Yep. Yep. You said have the right ego for success.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
That's the most important thing, I think, or one of the top right up there. You want to have. I've always been lucky, I think. I've always had a performance ego. In other words, I always wanted to, like, put me in, coach. Let me try. I can do it. That type of thing. If I learn something new from a 15-year-old kid in the gym tomorrow during my workout, I'll be in there tomorrow doing it. I'm happy about that. I'm happy to learn something from anybody. And I think one of the important things about Bandbell is that I took good ideas from people and suggestions all along the way, so it didn't have to come from me. I don't, I'm lucky enough to get ideas. It doesn't have to be something that, I thought of, I don't have that kind of ego. I have a performance ego, and I think most people do. They want to be good at something. They want to work and put the time and the effort in and sweat over it and all that kind of thing. So that's the kind of ego that you want. And take ideas from have a radar screen that just keeps going back and forth, taking good ideas from anybody that will offer it, and incorporate that, and that will serve you very well.
Literally today, I just read about this study they did where this individual gave groups of 4 people. He gave them, it's like 20 pieces of raw spaghetti, or like hard spaghetti. I think he gave them tape, gave them maybe like 1 or 2 other tools, and then he gave them a large marshmallow. And the goal was to build a tower essentially as high as you could, with the marshmallow having to be on top. And they used like these really intelligent groups of people. They used like groups of engineers, groups of lawyers, groups of business students, so on and so forth. They had a time limit. I don't know how long the time was, but they had some time limit. And then they would film them doing this. And then they also filmed kindergartners doing this. And would you believe it, that the kindergartners almost always built a larger structure than the lawyers, the doctors. Like on average, they, had like 5 or 7 inches taller of a building. And one of the things that they pointed to was that there's no ego amongst the kindergartners. Like everyone was just like, what about this? Try this, try this, try this, try this. And no one was like, this is my idea. Let's go with this. They weren't trying to find out who the top dog was, who the leader of the project was, because by the time that, these business students did that, like their time was running out and their initial idea didn't work and the tower collapsed and they just had to throw something together.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just amazing that like these kindergartners, they just were creative. They were like, it doesn't matter whose idea it is. And they would just be like, there, move this, this, this. And sure enough, that built a taller tower. Not having that ego, to your point, being willing to take advice from anybody and anyone. And as we get older and farther along and more successful, to your point, it's difficult to be like, someone told me something and actually that's good advice.
Yeah.
Even when they're like the junior person on the totem pole.
Oh, yeah.
I think the last one you said is give your work a chance to take hold.
Yeah. Be patient. Patience and that's the hardest thing for somebody when they're starting a new business, especially the younger you get, because you're champing at the bit big time. And that's a good thing. I mean, to be motivated and want to get in there, but you have to exercise, you have to have patience along the way. You have to build that into it, because if you don't, I think it's just it can get difficult without patience, and the process will teach it to you if you can't get a handle on it yourself.
Yeah, we just did our year-end recap and all the lessons we learned, and the first one was the fast way is the slow way. So just
I like that.
Don't try to speed it up, because I see so many young people who they'll do a business for 6 or 9 months and it's like kind of starting to work, and then they'll be like, I'm going to go into something different. So it's like, well, that was working. You just need to keep it going for another year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. You said your business started in the aughts. We're almost on 10 years now. So we've been at it a while, but not nearly as long, you know. So the longer you go, the more you're going to learn, and the more you're going to go, oh yeah, there were no shortcuts. Like all the shortcuts that I thought were out there were just like pitfalls. So if you avoid those shortcuts and just go, yeah, I'm going to do this the slowest way that I can, like do it right the whole time, that's what's almost guaranteed to work. And trying to skip that process is detrimental.
And hang in there, because statistics show that 75% of all businesses are gone after 15 years. And that percentage keeps building as time goes on. So in the first year, 25% or 1 in 4 drop out. And then at 5 years, it's roughly 40, 50%. And then by the time you get to 15 years, only 1 in 4 is left. So, you know, having your eye out there on the horizon and persevering, because it gets tougher, you know, as time goes on. It just seems like it does, and you just have to hang in there, and you have to be doggedly persistent, and that wins the day. You know, if you can hang in there in those really rough times, you know, that wins the day.
Yeah, the smartest or best or most well-funded company does not always end up being the one that sticks around.
My own personal, I dropped out of bodybuilding so I was, a lot younger and everything, and I dropped out of bodybuilding for a number of different reasons. But what it boiled down to was I dropped out because I didn't think I could go any further, or something along those lines. That was a mistake. Because then I saw guys as years went on who hung in there, and they kind of were flatlined with their success and that type of thing, but they stayed with it, and they wound up succeeding. And when I saw that a couple of times, I thought, because you know what? The technology changes. Diet technology started coming in just the beginning of it, the really smart stuff that people are doing today, right around the time that I dropped out. And training concepts, new training concepts and stuff like that. Today it's so much further ahead than what we had back in those days. I mean, if you hang in there, that's worth something. It really is.
I love it. Well, Jim, I think that's a good place to round off, man. I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. And when some of these new inventions come out, I'd love to talk again. Where can people find your products? Where can they catch up with you? Where's the easiest place to find stuff and to buy if people are listening and they want to work on their shoulder pain, heal different joints, or just gain another training modality?
Yeah, just Google bandbell.com. A lot of things will come up, different resellers like Rogue and Westside and all that kind of stuff. But if you just go to bandbell.com, that's my website, and it's always free shipping, and it's a little cheaper. So
heck yeah. Well, cool. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.